Hi, everyone, and welcome to my Communicating and Advocating for School and Community Needs. To start off in this presentation, I'm going to share some of the school board policies from the Derby School District and surrounding areas and how they address cultural diversity and multiculturalism. Okay, so to start off with, in the Derby School District, I found five different policies within the Derby School District policy book that reference cultural diversity or multiculturalism in some type of way. In the policy for our district's Title I program, it emphasizes the importance of assessing the needs for educationally disadvantaged children. And it also brings up the need of identifying appropriate communication channels between all stakeholders and especially those with limited English proficiency, parents and guardians with disabilities, and parents and guardians of migrant children. It also states the federal law that information in school reports must be provided in a format and language that parents and guardians can understand. Lastly, in this policy, it does address in service training for both parents and staff members, as well as an evaluation procedure. Out of our district's policy handbook, I do believe this to be the policy that has the largest focus on minority families and students with educational needs. There were other four other policies within our school district that I felt addressed multiculturalism or cultural diversity. And the first one was that a family night, where it stated that no family night events could take place on Wednesdays or Sundays. I initially thought this to be because of religious purposes. Also, it was mentioned that student textbooks and instructional materials help foster an appreciation for American culture, ethnic and racial diversity, and balanced views concerning international, national, and state and local issues. And lastly, trainings for all staff members and the use of positive behavior intervention strategies, which was mentioned in a previous module. In a surrounding school district, the Wichita Public School District, it had several policies in their handbook that address cultural diversity and multiculturalism. The two that stood out to me the most, though, were integration and diversity, equity, and accountability committee. Given that Wichita is a much more diverse school district, it does make sense that their district has a district-wide committee that focuses on diversity, equity, and accountability. I do believe, though, that the Derby School District is growing in its diversity, and believe that an appropriate next step could be creating some sort of policy that surrounds a district committee for diversity. The other three districts that I searched were the Mulvane, Wellington, and Hayesville public school districts. All three of their public school districts, with no surprise, were very similar to the Derby school districts. They all referenced three policies that I felt address cultural diversity needs. They had talked about the selection criteria for textbooks, the Title I programs, and family nights. I do believe the lack of policy for cultural diversity in these districts is that there is not high levels of diversity. I do believe, though, that this could be concerning, though, because there are minority families in these districts, and just the wonder is, are these families getting the supports they need in order for their children to be successful? Next, I will talk about training for faculty and staff and why it's important. So, families play a pivotal role in our students' education, and we know that the more engaged our families are in our students' education, the greater success they experience. According to Eisenbach, strong homeschool connections are essential for the academic success of all learners. Yet, many of us struggle to engage families, especially linguistically and culturally diverse families. In light of the achievement gap that disproportionately affects this population, improving homeschool connections should be at the forefront of every teacher's mind. This is why the schools should be using their resources to provide professional learning opportunities for staff and faculty. I did narrow down the research articles into three themes or three focus areas for the trainings. The three areas would be strategies to build relationships and get to know families with diverse backgrounds. The second would be classroom communication strategies, including digital outreach to reduce barriers. And lastly, sharing child academic and behavior information with families of diverse backgrounds. Let's talk about the first training that should take place, which would be strategies to build relationships and get to know families with diverse backgrounds. So, the benefits of this training would be that through getting to know families, we learn and grow as teachers, and our families and community members feel appreciated for their strengths. These efforts can change attitudes and improve the comfort levels of parents and guardians as we continue to engage them in the classroom. So, techniques, technologies, and methods that could be discussed during the training would be a strengths based approach to learning about families. A lot of the times, I know as educators, it's easy to focus on what maybe families lack, but also taking that approach of what strengths do they have, or what could they provide in our classroom and school. Also talking about generating family and child information with dignity. It could be very invasive based on the questions that we ask. So, learning about their interests, their heritage, and their needs, and their hopes and dreams for their children in a respectful way, and use this input to enhance the quality of their work. So, only asking those questions that maybe parents feel comfortable discussing. Obviously, trust needs to be established before those intensive questions gets asked. And lastly, just being supportive. In any conversation with a non native English speaker, treat them with respect, do your best to communicate clearly, and give them encouragement when they respond. Next, we'll talk about classroom communication strategies, including digital outreach to reduce barriers. The benefits of this training would be built on communication, built on misinformation, assumptions, or stereotypes can create distance between schools, families, and students. If handled with respect and cultural sensitivity, however, school family communication provides an opportunity to live out the values of inclusiveness and equity, which are at the heart of anti bias education. Families of all ELL and color face barriers that families of ELL and color face barriers that make becoming involved in their children's education difficult. Establishing effective communication methods to reach these families is crucial. Some of these methods could be two-way communication, which has been mentioned in previous modules, varying communication techniques such as using preferred language and methods of communication, online communication, phone conferences, newsletters, bulletin boards, and they also mention in-person um, conferences, as well as parent education events, which was something that I have experienced doing in a previous school district that I taught at. And lastly, inclusive terminology. So rather than saying mom and dad or addressing them as parents, just using dear family. And lastly, we'll talk about the sharing academic and behavior information with families of diverse backgrounds. So, the benefits of this training would be a strong partnership between staff and families that is built on positive communication. Positive communication skills help make sure that accurate information is shared, expectations are shared, and trust is established. Once trust is established, it makes it easier to have those difficult but important conversations with families. So some of the things that could be discussed through this training would be communication apps. Apps such as Class Dojo, Spotlight, Remind, or Seesaw. Simple communications apps like Class Dojo, Spotlight, Remind, and Seesaw allow educators to send mobile text, video summaries, and other alerts to parents about important school activities or their child's recent academic or behavioral progress. And lastly, offering families various opportunities to understand their children's development. This could be through weekly or monthly newsletters, one on one conferences, phone calls, communication journals, development behavior charts, portfolios, and progress reports. Overall, this is my references. And just in summary, I feel like the focus on cultural and diversity in trainings in the school is definitely something that needs to be considered more and should be a big priority for some of our school districts and schools. So, thank you for listening.